can be considered a legal scholar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're looking at things not just from the perspective of, of an activist mindset like your brother Saalakhan or your brother Tariq might have, or Amir Abdul Malik, but you come at it from a legal mind. And what are your thoughts on what has been discussed so far and what hasn't been discussed? There's so much on this table that we could bring to the fore.
Well, first of all, compliments to both your other speakers, both of them, brilliant analyses. Now tie it into America as a culture. I mean, because again, this is not just an American phenomenon. This is an international phenomenon. But tie it into America as a culture. You have your overt white supremacists and you have your covert white supremacists, according to Imam Ali, which I think is a brilliant analysis. I think that's exactly what's spot on. And I want you to look at the history of these Europeans who are following white supremacy. They have always been enemies to each other. But when they get to people of color, especially the so-called black man in America or the so-called black man in Africa, who they attempt to define, and I say so-called because I don't like to adopt the language of the oppressor. If a person wants to tell me that they're black, then cool. If they want to tell me that they're brown, they're cool. I don't have a problem with that. But if the oppressor is telling me that they're telling me that they're black for a particular different reason in order to fit into a hierarchy. So I say it in those terms, not to be disparaging. But when you put that together, the analysis that you just heard from both Tariq and Brother Ali, what you're talking about is in order for this white supremacist thing to work, there has to be a system created for that. The system is imploding on itself. Those covert / liberal whites who really believe in white supremacy, that is, their doctrine on white supremacy is, we can tell you what's best for you. All right. So you just follow along with what we want you to do and just be quiet and just accept your place in it, then you'll be fine. And that's why you have all these laws and all this stuff that structures around white supremacy. Go back and look at the Dred Scott decision. If you don't really understand racism, white supremacy, as Neely Fuller says, if you don't understand racism and white supremacy, everything that you think you know will only serve to confuse you. So go back and read Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1856. And what it will tell you is that a black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. And it will explain to you in detail the mindset that opened up the government here in America from 1619 was adopted and articulated by Justice Taney in Dred Scott, and then is permeated now to 2022. So it's written into the law. So even though you have your 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments that attempts to establish citizenship, it never establishes equality. Equality would assume the sharing of resources. That is, if you took something from me, if you broke my window, you would be responsible for repairing my window. The superiority, the arrogance, as both have articulated, would say, I don't have to repair your window. Pull yourself up by your bootstrap. That's white racism tropes being used to make sure that a particular people who they are in control of stay in a particular place. Go around the world and you'll see the exact same thing going on in France. You can't wear a hijab. You can't have open schools. You'll see it in Saudi. You can't call the adhan out loud, etc., etc. There's a superiority complex that exists in all these cultures, but it starts with white supremacy. You don't get Nazism except that they studied segregation, they studied slavery, they studied separation here in America. You don't get apartheid in South Africa except that they studied what was going on here in America. America had literally perfected or tried to perfect the art of being shaitanic, supremacist in their thought. And therefore, it's codified in the laws and in the practices that go on in the culture. The battle, you heard Brother Tariq talk about the Turner Diary saying there's going to be a race war. The Turner Diary skips the part that these racist white supremacists have always believed that the enemy to them is the government, the federal government. But the federal government is run by covert white supremacists who believe in a different way of subduing cultures, as opposed to the people here in America who believe we have to take the culture back and control it like Trump would say. We have to control it on our own. We have to put everybody who's here in their place, in their category, and make them stay there. The covert white supremacists like Trump, like Biden and Hillary and people like that, they believe, look, we can control blacks, we can control immigrants, we can control them and keep them in their place that way. The overt ones are saying, no, we're willing to fight even you. Because remember, the original doctrine of white supremacy that comes from out of the so-called grassroots, from the lower echelons of white supremacists, is that they are anti-government. They are your states' writers. The federal government, get out of us, we'll fight you for it. Weren't they the ones who invaded Michigan to plan to kidnap the governor there, Gretchen, right? Yeah. And attempted a plot to kidnap the governor in Virginia. That's the nature of what goes on the lower level. So they were looking forward to Trump telling them, giving them directions, call us out on January 6th, because they had stashes around here to be able to implement their version of white supremacy. That is that violent white supremacy. And eventually the covert white supremacist is going to have to match wits or arms with the overt white supremacy, because they are going to fight each other as they've always done around the world for supremacy here in America. Black people, that is people of color, regardless on what level you are within that, the minute you accept a position within that, you are succumbing to that white supremacist narrative, saying that at least I'm better than them niggas, for lack of a better way to put it. And as long as we still have people who believe like that, mashallah, Allah tells us who is the best amongst us. All right. And so that's one of the reasons why Islam is so despised around the world by supremacists, because Allah is the one that we submit to. There's no supreme in us. Allah tells us this is what makes you best. And so we compete in trying to be best in the eyes of Allah, not in the best in the eyes of man. Go to your Surah Al-Kahf and look into the two guys with the gardens and look at the conversation that they have. Where one says, I'm better than you because I got grapes and flowers and everything growing. And he says, you're going to wrong your own soul, basically, by saying that, we're not giving credit to Allah. And that's where we are. We're the people who have to be the ones who call the world to, look, Allah is in control of this. You better watch your back, because, the judgment of Allah is swift and the judgment of Allah is permanent.